All right.
Yeah.
How about that?
So they're still working for the permitting, and the due diligence. And Travis just started,
Okay,
so.
okay.
I think there's a tribal issue.
And Dayton?
I was actually realizing, I'm public works liaison, so I see Travis every Tuesday morning.
Mhm.
And I was like, you're at Parks Liaison. So I'm
Yep.
just trying to be like, I'm listening and I'm not, taking, except to be like, hey, can we get the bathrooms working at Granville?
Yeah.
Because I want to step on.
Everybody has their,
Now they're sort of
Oh, here's your pen.
joined.
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah, that's true.
This is off.
Oh, we do. Welcome, Jason. Thanks for coming. We're gonna get started here in just a second. So
Yeah, this is great. Are these
Commissioners-
all public? Can I come to this anytime?
yeah,
Anytime.
every Thursday at 10 o'clock.
Commissioner Terry was saying that you look familiar. I
You look
wanted to tell her
familiar.
that there was a big article about you in the news register like 3 years ago. Maybe it was more than that. It was like a
when-
picture of him in this field.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
You look really familiar to me.
Yeah, I
I've
did
been
that a
trying to
lot.
figure it out. I'm just staring at you, going, I know I've seen you before.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're ever ready. Okay. Now call to order, excuse me, the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for July 21st, 2022. It is 10:01 in the morning. And Colton, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item C is our calendar session. I don't know if we added, there's a grand opening ceremony for the Street of Dreams on Friday. Did we add that one? Can't remember.
I think it-
Okay.
If not, we can get that added.
That starts at 11:30, I think.
And
Other than that,
Friday night is the Dayton Parade and Saturday is the Newburgh
next week.
next week. No, a
Right.
week from, so for next week
And
Right.
there's Dayton Friday nights.
and Friday night,
Every Friday night.
Friday.
Okay.
So to clarify,
Which I will be at Dayton Friday night.
so Dayton Friday nights, we should add to the calendar.
It might be good
starting
too.
tomorrow or for next week.
It will probably be for next week because it's also the parade.
Tomorrow,
No,
The 29th.
the
Is-
29th, thank
I
you.
couldn't think of what it was.
30th is the Newburgh Old Fashioned.
Yeah.
And the 30th is Newburgh. Okay. And then the other item, I know that's a little further out. I know Carolina was working on the local government dinner is on the schedule for,
8th? Is it the 8th?
is it August 18th? 18th.
18th, yeah.
And so working on
Yeah.
getting the registration. If anybody's not planning to attend, just let us know.
Sounds good.
And then
Anything else?
I can't remember if it's on, but the Shemeketa convened broadband discussion. I can't remember.
Uh,
I'm like, are
It just
you
said-
on it? But I know that Commissioner Bershauer is.
I get the emails.
Oh, okay.
But I just
Okay.
saw one this morning.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the date was.
It's next
It's-
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that something that more than one commissioner intends on?
I've been attending them, but
Are we talking about mid Willamette Valley?
it's the Mid Willamette Valley Broadband Consortium. They have a name
Okay.
for it now.
Great.
I have Tuesday, the 26th at
At 3:30.
3:30. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I
So-
apologize. I was looking at Wednesday, but I had Tuesday above it. Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind emailing
Yeah, will do.
the invite, so we
Actually,
have the
just email it right
details to add to the calendar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further for the calendar? Okay, so item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. And we do have one individual here in person, but if you are attending online and wish to offer public comment for something that is not an agenda item, just please raise your virtual hand. But in the meantime, we will invite Jason up. Is it Lampman?
Lampman, yeah.
Lampman. Welcome, Jason. And
Thank
make sure you pull the microphone closer to you. And then if you could just state your name and address for the record, we would appreciate that.
My name is Jason Lampman. My address is 17175 Southwest Oldsville Road, McMinnville, Oregon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not too familiar with this. I was just notified last night that there is a public hearing, so I had to rush and prepare this morning. I was with respect, I would request I could take 10 minutes of your guys' time. I don't know if there's a limit or.
Well, we do have, what's the topic?
Measure 109.
Okay.
It's in regards to the conversation of the last meeting that I went back and listened to. Wanted to answer a lot of questions and kind of clarify some things.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you want to, we do have it on the schedule for August 11th, I believe it was,
I think so.
that we were going to talk about.
Oh, okay. It
Um,
was just my understanding from reading kind of what your introduction said that I can't speak while that item is on the agenda.
Right, so today you can offer public testimony on anything, right?
Uh-huh.
That's not an issue, but if you come on the 11th, we're going to talk about that issue specifically and make a decision. So you're also welcome to come on that day.
I would love
and
to
talk
be
about
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can speak about that, but you have to wait. So in other words, it's not like you're precluded from speaking about an agenda item. It's just that during public comment, you wouldn't make the comments until we got to that agenda item. So you can always address it
I
at any
understand.
time during that, as long as it's not during the public comment.
It's during the agenda item, not public comment. Okay.
And,
Yeah.
You know, and then the other part, and I'm going to look at Colton, sorry to put you on the spot, you know, the one time, because it's typically also associated to land use hearings as well, that we wouldn't necessarily something that's scheduled for a land use
Oh,
hearing
right.
to take
Mhm.
testimony that be outside of the record for that land use hearing. And I believe this is scheduled. This is something Jody and Christian were working on, but I'm trying to remember if on the 11th, if that was actually going to be a public hearing on a potential for an ordinance that refers questions to the ballot. I don't know if that precludes getting comment outside of the hearing because it's not a land use matter. I know most of our concerns about potential ex parte or things like that are more land use hearing related. So
I think it's up to us to determine how to run the meetings that we have, regular meetings, and I think
Yeah.
it makes sense if there's something on the agenda
Yeah.
to
Right.
allow for comments when that agenda item comes up. And
Yeah.
public comment here under section D is reserved for
Yeah.
everything else, anything else that the
Right.
public might want to comment on.
So it does say a topic scheduled for a hearing, but I don't believe
I don't
we've
think it's a public
noticed.
hearing.
We haven't noticed that as a hearing.
Yeah, it's just a decision that we were going to make. Well, how about, so if you are available to come on the 11th,
Yeah.
maybe save like the bulk of your testimony for that day. But if you want to give us a brief introduction of who you are and why you care about that issue, that would be great today.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That actually be better for me as well. So I can
Sure.
collect my thoughts. There's just a lot of information.
Yeah, there is.
So, well, thank you,
And there's a lot
Chair.
of not information too.
What's that?
There
Yeah.
seems to be
There's a
some
lack of
gaps.
information.
There really is, you know, and one thing that I'm noticing is that there's communication between departments is really tough to understand. And, you know, you have a job to do, you have other things rather than just focus on one thing that I'm concerned about. So I guess I'm a farmer here in McMinnville. I'm looking here, county administrator, and this is the whole commission or just the 3 commissioners?
3 commissioners,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Very quick.
So my concern with Measure 109 is in stating a ban that would directly affect my ability to make profits on my farm. And the reason that affects me is because I'm a small acreage farmer. I'm zoned for EFU 80, but I only have 1 acre farm to make money on. That cuts me out of any kind of taxes, what I forget what it is with Jordan is in charge of that with the county, but I don't get any deduction from my tax on my property or anything like that. So I just need any and every opportunity to make profits. I feel that the Measure 109 is safe. I feel like there is a lot of misinformation and non-information as well. The hard information that I have found that has been given out seems to be, I don't know if it's intentional, but it seems to be vague. And I believe a lot of that stuff is cleared up in the Measure 109 stuff. It's 77 pages. I read all of it this morning. It's a lot of information. So I will review that and come speak on in August as well. But the main fact is that I don't think a ban is going to help when this is a state. We voted for this already, and I did hear comments that it was a narrow victory, but a narrow victory is also a victory. I mean, I believe all of you would take your seat if it was a narrow victory as well, right?
True.
And I mean, I have 3 children that are under the age of 5. Safety is a huge concern for me as well. And that is the main focus that I see is safety. People want safe, but I think we've all been, part of restrictions that are in the name of safety, and sometimes they're not fact or science-based. And that's a thing that I see when listening back and looking back, even in my short research, that, a lot of times it's fear-based, not fact or science. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there is a lot of science and a lot of fact. And when you look at it, there is this program is not new. It's actually been going on for a year and a half. There's a lot of science. Most of the people that are involved in this are psychologists, doctors, and it's a really good opportunity for me to create generational wealth for my family, which is, I mean, I look at the properties, our neighbor's property is up for sale for $7 million.
Wow.
I'm never going to be able to purchase that. But we look at this when we say that we want to ban this because it's not safe. If you look at, I mean, the rules are one safety measure, but another safety measure is that I contacted every registered facilitator training program in the state that has already contacted the OHA, and they said that their minimum rate to become a facilitator in a facility is $6,000. They said the highest would be $12,000, and they said that's in line with everything in our state and across the country. Not to mention that they said that the actual service will cost between $700 and $15,000. That is a huge buffer, and that is also a safety measure, actually, because this is not going to be. I heard concerns from people in here and other people who I couldn't see because I was only listening to a recording that this is going to move to recreational. I don't think that that's true, and in fact, it states in section. Let me see here. Section 80 that the authority will require a license for the manufacture or sale of psilocybin products to the state is restricted solely, invested solely in the legislative assembly. There will be no recreational use unless it's passed through the House and Senate. And if you've followed any legislation, I mean, in the history of the United States, that's a huge feat. This is not going to be recreational in any time soon, even if this passes. And this is a service, not a in and out thing. There's three separate interactions that you must have with constant interaction with a facilitator. So I believe that's the mainly gist of it. I need to have more information. I think that there was a lot. I guess one more thing I wanted to say is it was kind of, people were asking, what is a facility? What are we making here? What is going on? Is this a bar? Are people going to run up and eat mushrooms and then go run around town? No, that's not going to happen. This is similar to a winery or similar to a farm stand where a business person or a family farm has an ability, or even a huge corporation has the ability to be vertically integrated, which again is, that's out of reach for me in most situations due to my property size and just my finances, really. I mean, we're successful, but I mean, you can only make so much money off 1 acre farm. So yeah, I would say to think about in your hearing in August that this is going to be a situation where it's a clinical situation in the vein of a vertically integrated winery or farm stand where there is a facilitator and a person receiving the service, not multiple people coming in and out all day. And it's very expensive. So I think that's, I feel like I'm rambling on, but that is basically the gist of my statement that I'd like to give. And I would love to come back in August and after I do more research.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
that's super
appreciate
helpful.
that.
Cool.
And if you, I think I sent you the email for public testimony, but if you feel like you want to email in something that you've written up, that's also really helpful because then we have some time to read it and review it before the meeting.
Okay.
If it's a lot and you're not sure you can get it all out orally, in public testimony,
Right,
feel
yeah.
free to do that too. And
Okay.
that will be submitted for the record. So
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's
great.
Thank you guys so much for the
Thanks,
time.
Jason. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Okay, is there anybody on virtually that has any public testimony other than agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to department updates. So we have none today. Item F is a work session. We have no work sessions today. Item G is consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval, Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Starrett moves approval. Is there any discussion?
No, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. And that brings us to item H, which is old business. Item H1 is discussion on repealing Ordinance 587, which provides term limits for elective county offices. And this was continued from June 30th of 2022. And I believe we have a draft. It's an ordinance technically, right? It's an ordinance to repeal an ordinance.
Correct.
Amended
Amend.
ordinance. And the draft that we requested and received was to remove everyone but the commissioners.
Correct.
Because at our last meeting, it seemed that there was a consensus to not include the commissioners in this process.
Right.
Is there questions, discussion on the draft that we have in front of us? Commissioners?
Chair, I appreciate the draft. That's what I was kind of anticipating. And though I came into this with a pretty open mind, public comment and your considerable thoughts and the thoughts of the elected officials who are affected by it definitely got me to this position, which is admittedly an awkward one of leaving out us, but I think that putting us in is also an awkward position. And I think this is the right thing for us to do, whether there's a right action by other people to even, I mean, people in the community could repeal this if they wanted to, if they felt strongly about not having commissioners on it. But I think for us, it's the right thing to do is what we have in front of us.
And I think it respects the will of the voters who've been very clear. I think when we look at the inherent political nature of the role of the elected body, that's one consideration. And then we look at the administrative role of the others. The only thing that I have had some questions about is the role of the sheriff that does have a political component. So I've often wondered whether or not that should be included with the commissioners. But as we know, the Court of Appeals is clear. If anybody wants to challenge it, they can challenge it. Even a commissioner down the road could say, we're going to file, we're going to go through a court, which would be an expensive and cumbersome and unfortunate. However, it is within their purview and the law to do that. So I think this is where we find ourselves and we need to respect that.
I agree. I've put some considerable thought into this back and forth, and I won't go into it all here. But at the end of the day, the reason that this was brought forward is because it has been challenged elsewhere and found to be unconstitutional. And we also lost an elected official who was being termed out and for legitimate reasons wanted to establish another career path for himself and his family. So I do think that this is sort of proactive in some ways, even though we are leaving the commissioners out. So do I have a motion to,
Chair,
we have to read it first and then.
I do have to read
Yes.
it fully and distinctly, so I'll try and pronunciate for
Okay.
everybody.
Ooh, it's exciting, not just by title only.
Not this time. The second meeting, we'll have it all squared away to do it by title. So, in the Board of Commissioners of the State of Oregon for the County of Yamhill, sitting for the transaction of county business, in the matter of an ordinance amending Ordinance 587, the term limits ordinance, to make term limits inapplicable to the positions of assessor, sheriff, clerk, and treasurer, effective November 2nd, 2022. The Board of Commissioners of Yamhill County, Oregon, the board, sat for the transaction of county business in formal session on August 4th, 2022. Commissioners Lindsay Bershauer, Casey Kula, and Mary Starrett being present. The board makes the following findings. The board adopted Ordinance 587 on March 15th, 1995 to refer a measure to the voters in the 1996 primary election to establish term limits for all elected county officers. The measure passed in the 1996 primary election and became effective with terms beginning in January 1997. The board conducted a public hearing in room 32 of the county courthouse on June 30th, 2022 to consider whether to repeal Ordinance 587 and remove term limits on county offices. The board instead voted tentatively to amend the ordinance and remove term limits for county offices except for the county commissioners. The board directed an ordinance to be prepared for consideration. Now, therefore, Section 1 of Ordinance 587 currently provides as follows. No person shall serve more than 3 terms of office as a Yamhill County Commissioner, the Yamhill County Sheriff, the Yamhill County Clerk, the Yamhill County Assessor, or the Yamhill County Treasurer. The limitation established by this section on the office of Yamhill County Commissioner applies to combined service in all 3 of the positions established under ORS 204.013, 2007 replacement part. The board ordains as follows. Section 1, amendment to Ordinance 587. Section 1 of Ordinance 587 is deleted and replaced with the following language. No person shall serve more than 3 terms of office as a Yamhill County Commissioner. This limitation applies to combined service in all 3 of the positions established under ORS Chapter 204.013, 2021 edition. Section 2, remainder of Ordinance 587 unchanged, except as provided in Section 1 of this ordinance. The remainder of Ordinance 587 is not affected. Section 3, readings and effective date. The first reading of this ordinance was made July 21st, 2022. The second reading of this ordinance was made August 4th, 2022. This ordinance is effective November 2nd, 2022. Ayes, Commissioners Bershauer, Kula, and Starrett. Nays, none. Done on this 4th day of August, 2022 at McMinnville, Oregon. attest, Carrie Hinton, County Clerk, Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. There are spots for Chair Lindsay Burschauer, Commissioner Casey Kula, Commissioner Mary Starrett, a spot for Deputy Carolina Rook, form approved by Christian Burnish, County Council.
Great. Thank you, Colton.
Thank you, Colton.
So there's no motion, there's no vote. We have to do a second reading and then we'll act. Correct.
Correct. You could discuss it at this point, right? You can
Well,
make motions to amend or, excuse me, make changes to the draft.
Okay.
Right?
Well, with what you were reading reflected that there was a vote with the ayes, which hasn't occurred yet. That I
Right,
know
it
it's
is a
in the
draft,
document. It's a draft.
So that could be revised based on the reality of the
The
vote.
vote.
Yeah, would need to be. Yeah, so I think upon the first reading, there can be a discussion about the language of the ordinance and if it needs to be tweaked, changed, scrapped, whatever.
I have a question, Colton. So we know that that there has been a court challenge. We know the outcome of the court challenge. So by the very nature of passing this or, the presumption that we'll pass this, how does this place us in sort of the legal arena that we are knowingly agreeing to pass something that we know has not stood up?
It makes me uncomfortable that we would do that. But I don't know if it's any worse than having one in effect, right? Ordinance 587 exists now as a county ordinance and applies to county commissioners. That seems to be in conflict with the ruling from the Court of Appeals. Amending it doesn't change that fact, right? Amending it, all we'd be doing is passing an ordinance that reaffirms that we like this limit on the county commissioners. And I would say it doesn't look so great that we would do that. And from a legal point of view. But I don't know if it exposes us to additional liability. I don't think it would. Right? I think if somebody wanted to challenge the ordinance now on the basis of that Court of Appeals decision, they could, if they have the cause of action, which I would think it tends to come up with a mandamus action for somebody seeking their third or beyond their third term in office, and they challenge the ordinance. So, sorry, that's not a very clear answer. Generally, I would say, I can't say it exposes us to additional liability.
So this is not something that there would be anybody within the public would have. This would not be actionable for them. The only one is someone who had standing, and that would be someone who was filing and then was being told you can't file again.
Generally, that's how it comes up, though there might be other ways to challenge a existing ordinance. I haven't done that research. I could, if you want, I could.
No, I think we need to go in. We've acknowledged that this is something that wouldn't stand up in court, but we're, I guess, making more of a policy statement with this.
Well, it sounds like if a commissioner in the future were to challenge this document would be brought into that discussion. So would, as we saw with the Second Amendment discussion, so would our discussions here. The tapes would be reviewed and obviously would undermine our legal position if we were even going to defend the ordinance. So,
In regards to commissioners, we don't have much of a legal position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think anything we say here is wouldn't be super relevant. I think the main thing would be relevant. The thing that would be relevant is the language of the ordinance.
Yeah.
That we have limits on
Okay.
commissioners when there's this case from 2017 that says we're not supposed to.
okay.
Interesting.
I like that you and I said, at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we're acknowledging it. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with the optics. I mean, if you've got 3 commissioners that are voting to allow themselves to continue ad infinitum and not have any limits on that, that has
I
a certain
just
set of.
barely am less bad optics.
There
Sorry.
may be some political
But
implications there.
nevertheless, we were all acknowledging that,
Yeah.
that this is just, is it just a positional statement?
The moving of the removing of term limits from the administrative position, elected administrative positions is for sure its own real thing. And so I don't want to minimize that, but
Right.
that's a big deal.
Right, it
Yeah.
is.
Mhm.
It is a big deal.
And it's in accordance with case law and with the requests of them and with how we feel about those positions. So,
Right.
Right.
This has been something we've talked about for so many years, just when we see how frustrating it was that we would actually lose, for instance, an assessor or a clerk or it just like that. So this is, I consider it a positive, at least overall.
Well, and I'd say that's the main policy decision here is in regards to those administrative positions where
Yes.
you lose years of expertise. Not to say you 3 aren't experts, but the assessor and the sheriff, those are and the clerk, of course, are positions that takes a bit of time to get
Mhm.
even up to speed.
Mhm.
So.
Well, and I appreciate the contributions that former commissioners Dennis Gex and Leslie Lewis, I talked to Leslie Lewis about this, made, and because I think their perspective is different. They have the perspective of how this sort of came from the voters and
Sure.
the
Right.
sentiment of the voters at that time. You know, Leslie just thinks that no commissioner should serve more than 3 terms. 12 years is enough.
Mhm.
You know, move on, do something else. And I agree with her. So
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a different perspective there. And that's really frankly what I was wrestling with is that versus things change, laws are challenged. And now we have something that has been challenged successfully. So we also have to respond to what's in front of us. So I wanted to thank them for their input
Yeah.
and insight.
And also the, just hearing from the assessor and hearing from the sheriff to some degree, I think it really did help to make it clear what we had before us.
So
Great.
I do see this as, to clarify, I see this as us removing term limits from the ordinance for
Mhm.
specific positions, as opposed to a policy decision of keeping term limits for commissioners. And I know that that's like, it's literally one side of a balance, but
Right.
that's the action that
Mm.
I'm comfortable taking, I guess,
Sure.
right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I
Makes
like the
sense.
way that the ordinance is structured and worded. I think it's perfect. So,
Yeah. And thank you for working on it,
Mhm.
Colton.
Oh, no trouble.
okay, so we will have our second reading on next week? No,
Fourth?
2 weeks.
August 4th, which is also my birthday.
Oh,
Well, is it really? Well, we're going to
Just-
have to remember that. Will you be here to read that on your birthday?
I'll be here, sure.
Well, that'll be festive, huh?
And it is your first ever legal memo that started this too.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
there's something to behold in that. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are on item I, other business. Item I1 is consideration of approval of an intent to award notice and contract to HR Green for rural broadband consulting services. And Ken, did you want to kind of give us a brief overview on this?
Yeah, so really quickly, Justin put together the memorandum that's in the packet that, as mentioned before, is part of one of the ARPA projects that we've been working on associated with rural broadband. One element of that was to solicit, do an RFP process to find a rural broadband consultant to help the county collect data and help put together a plan, and then also put together a grant program that would be rolled out and available to local, I don't know what we're still early. We haven't, I think the vision is potentially a grant program to support capital projects throughout the county to help with those underserved or areas of the county that have no service for rural broadband. We did a competitive process. We had 3 responses to the RFP. We had an internal administrative review committee that consisted of the IT manager, deputy county administrator, myself, and our grants manager. The 4 of us did a review of the 3 applications. HR Green came out with the highest score and is who we're recommending that we proceed with, both based on experience and their responses to the RFP. They did a really nice job responding to that. And so what we'd like to do is this next step is get approval to issue the notice of intent to award, which then starts the days for the others to I'm having a hard time with words. today.
protest.
Challenge.
Protest, thank you, to open the protest period. But then to also allow staff to go ahead and start working on the contract negotiation for a final contract. And the only thing, if the board would be okay with it, would be authorizing a county administrator to enter into the contract at that time, once we run that through county council and everyone else.
Commissioners?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ken. I have a question, and I think we spoke about this individually, but the grant administration aspect of this,
Mhm.
are we going to get further, we're going to get more details, and will that necessarily will all be covered, the complete administration of the grant with
No.
this?
Not everything, because grant administration is kind of a big term. What we're looking at doing, and once we finalize the scope of work under the contract and working with that, with the consultant, what we're envisioning is the planning effort taking the next 4 to 6 months to collect the data, get that put together, and then start based on the findings of that plan to put together a grant program. We're going to be looking for them to identify how we're going to be able to address the needs and priorities that are identified in that plan. And there's going to be several public components and talking to ISPs and coming before the board and having conversations as well around the findings of that. And then when you get into the grant program, we didn't necessarily get into the details because we want to make sure that we're able to adapt it to a certain degree depending on those findings. But we're looking at, based on the plan and having the consultant put together the grant program up to essentially cutting checks and agreements.
And we do that.
And we would handle that function.
Okay.
There's a certain element associated with both ARPA and for the additional funding that we also received in the direct allocation from the state, that we have an obligation to provide those reports. And so that's why there'll be elements that they're going to help roll out the program. But then once the checks are issued and the grant agreements, we're not looking at retaining, beyond that part with the consultant fees. That's where staff would take over at that point.
Okay, great. Thank
There's a
you.
lot of elements and phases to grant administration. So it'll come up to a point and then the county will step in.
Okay, thank you.
Philip?
Yeah,
Questions?
thank you for getting us this far, Ken, and team. It was good to actually have multiple options to choose from as far as responses. It's also been good to see that they are working with Jackson and Josephine County, and that clearly that was a good, at least it seems like a good move from the outside to have them working together on that. Since they're in many ways it's an arbitrary line down there.
Yeah.
Geographic features are the thing that drives people. So it was clear to me, like I learned a lot by reading their proposal. And I figured that was a really good sign. Admittedly, I have a lot less knowledge about this than many other people. So I was still learning a lot from it.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see that no Oregon companies
Yeah.
responded. Obviously, we don't want to send our ARPA dollars outside of the state, but clearly these folks have been around for over 100 years.
Yeah.
So they're very skilled and knowledgeable in this. And the fact that they are working with other Oregon counties makes me feel
Yeah.
confident. So
Yes.
And ideally, the grants that they will help get out the door will be to Oregon companies.
Yeah.
So some of them will likely to be to global companies. you
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
Mhm.
Reality of internet service provision right now.
Okay. Okay, well, if there's nothing further, I will take a motion to approve item I1.
I move that we approve item I1.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I2 is consideration of maintenance assistance grant intergovernmental agreement number 2123-070 between Yamaha County and the Oregon State Marine Board, OSMB, for maintenance costs at Dayton, Edinger, and Rogers Landings in the amount of $30,950 retroactive to July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2023. And I will move approval of item I2. Is there further discussion?
Oh, it's just great to see this money coming in for very needed work.
Okay. No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I3, consideration of approval of a service and fee agreement between Yamaha County and Qualtrics for enterprise advanced cloud-based survey software in the amount of $14,972.87 retroactive to June 14, 2022 through June 13th of 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Commissioner Sterrett moves approval. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. And item I4, consideration of approval of the 2022 fund exchange agreement number, let's see, 73000008765 between Yamaha County and the Oregon Department of Transportation, or ODOT, to exchange $655,259.79 in federal funds for $655,259.79 in state funds for the Newburgh-Dundee Bypass Project, effective upon execution for 2 calendar years. And can we kind of discuss that this is something that happens every year, every 2 years? Okay, I will move approval of item I4. Is there further discussion?
No, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, that brings us to public hearings. We have no public hearings today, and item K is announcements. Commissioners, do we have announcements today?
We had the meeting of the Affordable Housing Corporation through Housing Authority yesterday. I know Ken's on that board as well. And they gave the board an update on the properties that they're working with that the county has offered, and also that they were able to help 39 folks who have manufactured home through the CDBG grant through McMinnville. And there were over 60 people who were helped as a result of that. So that's been very effective. And the revolving loan continues to help people with home repairs countywide.
Great. Just a quick update, and then a couple things I was hoping for some guidance on. The contract with Homeward Bound Pets seems to be sort of stabilized at this point. We have some agreement there. So we should see that coming forward. I think next week that was going to come forward. Still not quite meeting the county's needs, but I met with the sheriff this week, and we're figuring out ways to handle that. So we should see that next week. Some guidance on, I know we've been getting emails on the High Heaven Road Gate issue.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to discuss sort of what the next step is here. I've been trying to
give you an
answer.
update, but I can.
Yeah, and they were emailing all of us, and I finally told Lisa that, we can't talk. So you're only going to hear us or see us emailing you directly. So I
And I
asked.
can give more.
You
details too, if want.
probably have more, you've had the history of doing this. I did talk to the sheriff about the kind of what's happened there. He did state that as of January of this year, there hasn't been any calls for, any type of 911 or crime related activity going on there. So it sounds more like a litter, / people are perhaps misusing the property or going off of the road on the way to the public property, but I'm not quite sure what the next step would be. My sort of basic overall view is that this is public property and that the public has a right to access it. So, but I don't quite know the history behind the gate and why and what precipitated the closures and then reopening. So I'm looking for some guidance there.
Well, we've just had this one on for so long, but some people wanted the gate closed and some people wanted the gate open. And there were concerns when the gate was closed, and there were legitimate concerns about fire and different things like that, and access to who had access to open the gate. So we had a number of public hearings, I believe, and lots of input from neighbors and the public.
I was recalling lots of input from the public.
Yes,
Yeah, and not just people who live there.
right.
And that's, I think you probably saw, because they included notes from our meeting this last Sunday. But that's really been my, kind of my default position is public roads should be open to the public, to the traveling public. There was expressed concerns about how, well, we don't want cars there, but we're okay with horses. And I was like, yes, but it's a public road. If a dirt bike goes on the other side of that gate, they're still legally allowed there. We're not calling it trespass to have somebody on the other side of the gate. And it's just a matter of which thing you don't like versus what somebody else might like to have there. That even if there's a gate there. So it sounds like based upon the old timers who were up there, the gate was installed way back in the, I think it was in 2001. Yeah. And I think actually, Ken, you maybe were working for the BLM around that? No.
Oh, yeah,
But listening to the concerns and listening to Weyerhaeuser, I wanted to make sure that that folks had the tools that they needed, even if the gate were to continue to stay open as it is, which was, are you planning for fire on your property and with your neighbors? Do you need help with that? I can connect you to those resources. If there's garbage or if there are vehicles in the road that have been dumped, we actually have money in the solid waste fund specifically for that. If you have problems with the road, here's where to call. Because there are things that neighbors may not have known about up there.
Okay.
In listening more closely to them, I said that, I agreed to start the process for a seasonal gate closure for fire season, because that felt like a step that had a justification in the environmental, risks in that community. The thing that's weird about that, of course, is that one of the original motivations, as you remember, for opening the gate was for access in the event of a fire.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
But I think that it's important. Oh, I was going to, sorry. I think it's important for folks like the Road Improvement Advisory Committee to have thoughts on it too, which, I was so unfamiliar with the process that it didn't even invite them in, and in the previous discussions. But sorry, you were about to say something.
Well, I understand the fear around wildfires, but look at the Gorge Fire. I mean, that was started by a kid at a campfire. So what, are we just going to shut off all public land and, for 5 months? I mean, I don't really
I mean, I would say
how
no, but
that doesn't work. And people like Weyerhaeuser and Stimson and other, they are aware of this risk. That's why they thin and they do certain things to prevent or mitigate damage. So
it's also why they gate certain roads that they know are going to be heavily trafficked if they don't gate them. Yeah, on their
own
internal
property,
circulation.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it seems like as of 2019, I think it was 2019, this, not this board, but when Commissioner Olson was here, kind of reaffirmed that contract with Weyerhaeuser, right, for the gate. But was stated that it should remain open.
Locked open.
Yeah,
Locked
locked
open.
open. That's right. That's what we
Um,
required.
And that any change to that is, I'm assuming the process is to come before the board.
Yeah, that was
think-
the part that I was going to talk about process wise, and that's where I'd, previously we were relying on Bill Gilly, who has since retired. And so if there, because of there's several layers of ownership with the roads, and that's going to drive the process for gating any of the roads. That's the reason we went through the public hearings and the process that we did last time, to have that discussion about modifying or amending so I think we would go through we'd have to go through a similar process if there's intent to go. I haven't looked at it in several years, but because previously in 2000 or 2001, the gate was approved to be installed and locked.
Mhm.
In 2021, it was amended to be locked open.
Right.
But so if there was a further amendment or if the board wanted to consider locking due to fire conditions or having provisions to be able to secure that, I think we would have to go through a similar process as we did last time to make that amendment.
Yeah,
or
and I
adjustment.
had actually before meeting with the neighbors, I had communicated with Scott Marlega from Weyerhaeuser,
Mhm.
and I forget his new regional manager, but Scott and I are the ones who've communicated a
Mhm.
lot in the past about, does it make sense to consider gate closures at a higher fire protection level in IFPL? Then, fire season is really ODF announces, but then there's the industrial fire protection levels that go up through time. And in some of those, it would be wise, at IFPL 4, it's, you look at the ground with a hot look and it lights on fire and spreads, right? So some of those probably would be exceptional circumstances that would make it, Scott was open to that as well.
Well, but my question is, does the public land at the top ever close under those circumstances?
The public land does not close.
So, and that's what I discussed with the sheriff, is
Mhm.
people will find the other way around. They'll go around through Sheridan and go the long way.
Yeah.
And get up there anyway. So what are you really doing to
Or from
mitigate?
Vaughn Road. Vaughn Road is, from Carlton and Panther Creek, Middle Lake.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, and I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of times when you have those increased fire restrictions, it restricts the types of activities that can occur
Yeah.
out
Mhm.
in those areas, not access.
Yes, exactly. I
Mhm.
think you're accurate about that.
Yep.
Yeah. Like non-motorized. and-
Chainsaws,
Mhm.
Yes.
it's a big
No.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other
And
issue
I have full disclosure too, I spent a lot of time out there, both on the road and in the public lands out there. So I'm intimately familiar with it and have a personal, it feels like when we have these long discussions, I decided I need to see this space, right?
Mhm.
And now I spend a lot of time out there. What you were saying, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sort of taking off the concerns they had. One of them was with gunshots or, gunfire.
Yeah.
And the sheriff said, hey, look, it's a public land. You can go up there and hunt and fish and do whatever. We're not going to be going out there because somebody heard gunshots. It's not
Target
realistic.
shooting though is actually, you had mentioned activities as opposed to access. Target shooting after a certain IFPL level is reached, or IFPL is reached. It is one of those activities that then the BLM says, you can't do this
Okay.
now. But you're right
Okay.
about that.
And the other part I would add too, because what gets further complicated, to drive to it, is if you look at a map and it is a checkerboard of you have private timber with public lands, and you
Right.
can kind of see this checkerboard. So
Yeah.
just to say that just because there's public lands, there's also a mix of private lands on there. So you'll see a lot of signs for Weyerhaeuser properties and a lot of those areas that further restricts access and activities on those properties. But again, that's going off the road if
Yeah.
it's a public road.
Mhm.
That's right. I do think that there needs to be more education to the public about if you encounter a car abandoned on the side of the road, you don't just have to complain. Complaining is okay, but letting us know about it is an important move too.
Right, to a certain, I mean, like the motors or the dirt bikes that are not licensed. I mean, that's
Right.
not something we can police.
Yeah.
It's just, it's gonna happen.
That's something that they take everybody who's on the road with a non-street legal dirt bike takes a risk.
Yeah.
Right, that around the corner is the sheriff's woods deputy.
Right, and I don't know if he still lives there, but our old sheriff's woods deputy lived
He does
there.
not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was kind of convenient.
I'm
when he
trying to
did.
remember the sergeant that I encountered the other day.
Casey?
It was a happy encounter.
Was
Just,
it Casey?
no. It's
I'm not sure who's the woods deputy right now. But
I
yes,
have
there
his
used to be a
card.
former sheriff's office employee who lived up in that area.
But I did in the process of the conversation, which was robust, because I was like, here's my position and here's county, here's county rules, here's state rules, here's my position. But I did hear a lot of praise for the OSP's fish and game trooper, Jerome. And so I just want to shout out, he's been very helpful to me in explaining kind of gates and what people can do in the woods so that I can help explain it to other people.
Well, I want to be responsive to their concerns. I mean, they
Mhm.
have quite a few of the neighbors around there that have sort of come together and they're pushing for this closure. I guess I'm looking for, what are the next 2 or 3 things we can do to respond? Because I do feel like when you live up in the woods, that you have these inherent risks that you take, right? You chose to be up there. And there was another issue that came up, I think, when the gates were closed, where someone lived beyond the gate and couldn't sell their property or something. So they wanted them open because it was impacting their ability to sell their property.
That was one of the public comments.
But beyond that, it's public land. And so, my basic view is the gate should be kept open. If it's an issue of the county not maintaining the road, or there's some, significant safety concerns, obviously we need to address that.
Yeah.
But
And I reminded them, I explained the situation that we set aside, and because it was a road that's a public road that doesn't have maintenance costs associated with it automatically, that as a board, we added, we created a budget for it based upon what that section of road cost to maintain in the past, to a level of passability. And I explained to them, if you have an issue with the road, then you need to let Public Works know so that they can go up there, and then they'll set aside their time and value it so that it's actually taken care of. It's like included in the fund. I did caution them that if you have a road that's smoother, what that means is that people drive faster on it. And that as a road user, I drive more slowly on their road because it's got big potholes in it. They're not potholes, they're like,
Sinkholes.
ponds.
Sinkholes.
There's a bottom in it, but, and I don't have Ken's truck.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I'm comfortable with having that conversation about closure for high fire danger. But beyond that, I think that you're right that or at least my view has been the default should be that the gate is open for the traveling public who all pay taxes to keep it open.
So remind me how much distance is between the gate and the actual sort of main part of the public where everybody goes.
See, and that's the hard part, because
There's not really.
You'd have to look at a map and you're going to see kind of a patchwork of, and you can, a checkerboard of private and most of it's BLM. I'm trying to remember if there's
Yeah.
some ODF, if there's some state lands that are also, I'm not sure. I
don't
haven't
think
looked at a
in
map
that
in quite a
particular
few years.
spot
Yeah,
There's, I think it's just BLM.
right.
Well, you said you go up there a lot. So how far, where everybody typically goes, how far is that from the gate?
Yeah, well, it's a funny, It is essentially a gateway to a lot of public land, but also a gateway to private timberland that invites people on because they know that people on foot are good for their security purposes. So like Hancock land is, the way that it goes is there's about 3 miles between 2 gates, and both of those gates are open. And that's a county road. There's 3 miles between gate and gate. And then on either side, there's Weyerhaeuser land that's not open to the public. There's Weyerhaeuser land that is open to the public. There's Hancock land that's open to the public based upon the signs and for the activities.
And then you have the Weyerhaeuser leased lands
Yeah,
as
right,
well.
which is not open to the public.
Correct.
Yeah, and then it's public land. And then beyond the public land is then again more checkerboard. And past that is a fairly significant chunk of off-road vehicle land as well. So a lot of people who are taking that road, it's the shortest
Right.
route to the off-roading properties that are specifically intended for off-road
The
activity.
BLM OHV
Yeah.
areas up off Nestucca.
I
Is
mean,
that where you're
it's the
thinking of?
shortest by miles. And if you have a street legal dirt bike, you can, like one of the neighbors said that he gets on his bike and rides out there specifically from the gate, right? Like he lives at the gate and gets on it. And if he didn't do that, it would be miles and miles and miles to have.
It's a pretty extensive network of roads, because just like
Yeah.
Commissioner Kula was saying, that it ties in, and again, it's a variety of ownerships
Okay.
up in the hills there.
I guess I don't, with the closure during high fire season, I don't want to give them a false sense of security, because if people are able to access another way, they're going to be up there anyway.
Mhm.
So why would we give them that sort of false sense of security when they're only 5 miles away from the activity that could potentially, heighten the risk of fire?
But you are-
It doesn't quite make sense unless you're
that's a
going to
good point.
actually lock it down and say, nobody can come here.
And there are some other gates in other locations that are outside county jurisdiction. That it was an agreement between the landowner and the Bureau of Land Management to install gates, or there may be gates because that's actually a private road that's exclusive to that timber company. So there are some other gates, because I just know that immediate area, there's I believe the one on Baker Creek that the county doesn't have jurisdiction
No,
on.
it's Bass County.
That's between the Bureau of Land Management and
Mhm.
Weyerhaeuser. That could potentially close off a portion of that. There's some other gates that do close off, because that's not, those aren't public roads. So once you start looking at the maps and you see the patchwork of ownership, and then also just the sheer volume of roads up in that area, it does present some challenges.
I mean, I do think that there is, clearly a need based, because I had the same conversation with the sheriff.
Mhm.
Have you? And at that point, his team was, his management team, it was understaffed, and he was like, okay, it's going to take me some time. But he said, as far as he knows, there's not been anything called in, and likewise from the public works side of things, there haven't been things that are called in. And it feels like making sure that folks know you can call the sheriff, and here's what you can call public works about too, is a really important next step. It's to get that communication out there. And it's not just your responsibility to call in. It's like, this is why we all pay taxes. It's so that our public works team responds to these issues. And if there's a vehicle blocking the road, for example, that it gets taken care of.
Right.
But there are still situations where, the sheriff, residents in the county should call the sheriff if somebody is shooting guns in the night down onto them, regardless of whether it's on public land and they're just target shooting during certain times of the year. It's still, if it's a safety issue, they need to be calling it. Even if they don't feel like their response is sufficient in the end. Because I try to explain that's like how we build up a record, right? Of okay, here's what's happening in this location.
Mhm.
And if the sheriff isn't reporting, getting those calls, is one or two things is happening. We don't want to assume there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
We want to assume that they're not necessarily sure who to call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one thing I could do, oh, you were gonna say something.
Well, if hunting is allowed within 5 miles of where they live, you're gonna hear gunshot. I mean, that's part of living in rural Yamaha County. So I just wasn't sure. I mean, gunfire coming at you is different
It is different. Yeah.
than hearing somebody hunting, miles away.
Yeah. Hunting is allowed immediately on the private leaseholder land that's warehouse or immediately adjacent to the
Okay.
neighborhood too.
Okay.
So if it feels close, it is close.
Okay.
potentially.
Well, maybe more public education on who uses that for hunting
Mhm.
would be. So you mentioned RIAC. Is that something that would be a next step to have them sort of look at?
Well, I can,
Yes.
I've never brought the issue of gates before them, but they are the road improvement advisory committee and they take a lot of ownership over issues like that of access
Okay.
and safety on the roads. I told the folks on High Heaven Road that I would bring it to them to hear their thoughts about gates in general, right? And then what I can also do is I can do a follow-up communication with the folks on High Heaven about, because I didn't do the okay, here's exactly the place where you go and here's exactly the place where you go.
Would it be advantageous to have some of the folks that you met with and are most vocal about this show up at RIAC?
Yes, that's a good point. I will invite them.
Okay. And then they did send me some information on these, because I asked them when they mentioned there were previous wildfires. I asked them for the data on that because we don't necessarily interact with the fire departments
Yeah.
all the time. So,
Right, that's a good point.
so I'll review that. It looks like they sent some information. And maybe we just follow up next week and see where we're at.
That sounds good.
And when's the
Okay.
next RIAC meeting?
They're
Third?
the first full Thursday of the month. So we're coming up. It should be on the 4th.
Or
Next week.
Okay.
The one part that I would just highlight is having a discussion with Mark and with his team.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of this happened before Mark was the director of Public Works. Also, Bill Gilly at the time was still working for us. He's since retired. So we've had some changes with staff. And so just knowing before staff go walking into a RIAC meeting and they're going to be looking for them to provide input on
Yes.
process and some of these other things, probably allowing Mark some sufficient time to get himself also up to speed on this particular issue.
I'm sorry, I should have clarified that
Right.
I have brought it up with them. I will, and they'll have all of their.
And Mark and I
information in
talked about it
order.
yesterday and I shared some of the
Yeah.
items, but I just wanted to highlight that,
Absolutely.
before we open up the gates, so to say, for a RIAC meeting and knowing, and I would just highlight, because I do remember, sitting through this and how contentious the issue was.
Yeah.
And all the discussions around this issue. It was a very contentious topic.
Right.
And we had a lot of testimony, a lot of attendees at the sessions on both sides of the issue. So, so this
The
has
most
not been
commented
without
on.
its controversy.
Right, I will say that it's the most commented on Facebook post I've ever had, and was one around there, and there were like 100,000 comments on it. Because we're not limited here. It's not just what's happening here, but all across the state. It's convenient to put up a gate to think that, well, what I learned was that around the state, it's convenient to put up a gate to think that it'll solve problems.
right.
But absolutely. I'll
Just to
communicate
maybe,
with them.
this might be a dumb question, but if Weyerhaeuser has the ability to close the gate through some process with the county, what are the conditions? First of all, have they requested to do that? Second, what are the conditions that they would do that under? Is it only
Right.
wildfire risk, or is there something else that would?
It would be up to us to have
Mhm.
make those decisions. I think.
Okay, so it sounds like they haven't formally requested or they
No.
don't seem to be signaling that they need it closed.
Because
Which
to
matters.
further kind of complicate it, when the original approval, when the gates were installed, it wasn't with Weyerhaeuser, it
wasn't.
was Willamette Industries.
Right, okay.
Who, and so it was Willamette Industries who came forward with a request
Mhm.
to the county. This was before my time, so I'm just going off the records
Yeah.
and all the materials that I've seen. Made the request, and then the board held hearings, and then they approved installing the gate and closing access. And so it was a request that came forward. And then when it started in 2018, it started with requests from individuals asking the board to reconsider that gate and to open that. And ultimately, it's up to the board if you want to schedule that and open that up for discussion
Right.
and make a decision. But I think as far as conditions or anything that was in there, there was things like, as an example, along those lines, like a condition was you can lock it, but you have to make sure that Public Works, the sheriff's office, the neighbor
Neighbors.
have keys so they can access, and emergency services have access through the gate. You know, those are the types of
Yeah.
conditions that the board could put on that type of approval. And so something along the lines like a condition that if conditions reaches a certain identified level on fire restrictions, you know, that's a condition that the board could consider as part of that process of
Right.
building into that permit in order to essentially close that portion of the county road.
There was one specific request is that from Weyerhaeuser, you know, they have a lot of signs up there. But in honor of reflecting that this is a county road, they requested that some of the signs they have be replaced with Public Works specific county road signs. And so I was just gonna make the connection between Public Works staff like Mark, Director Lago, and Scott for some of those. Because some of those that, you know, they want a sign that says day use area only, and that's not it's not an appropriate use of a county sign unless that's what Director Friday thinks. Because like, you know, you can be on a county road night and
Yeah.
day.
Yeah,
But the request is Weyerhaeuser land, that they that's just their own internal rules. But some of the, you know, they have signs because there's never been a switch over to county signs
because it was closed.
because it was closed. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I just thought, well, I'll connect them about it to see if there are, you know, because sometimes there's like.
I don't know if we would necessarily post day use only or anything
No,
like
exactly,
that. That's
yeah.
restrictions if Weyerhaeuser wants to put on their property,
Mhm.
like no trespassing, no
Mhm.
day use only,
Yeah.
whatever restrictions that would be specific to their property.
Yeah, but and there are things like up on High Heaven as you come up, there's a steep hill and then it gets into a lot of homes. I think there's a sign that says slow congested area ahead,
Mhm.
which I always think is funny. It's like you're in the middle of nowhere. You can imagine somebody being like, what? So there may be some of that where warning signs are appropriate, but we just haven't really looked at it yet.
Okay, well,
And Director Lago is really good at filtering those, I think.
so we're not duplicating effort or having some type of,
Mhm.
you know, quasi discussion. Why don't, if you want to tackle those things with RIAC and all that,
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna follow up on the fire. I'll
Yeah, that sounds great.
talk to the fire chief and see if I can get some clarification on that, but
I know that I talked with a captain at McMinnville Fire, and you know, his kind of way of expressing it was, sure, there's probably more activity that leads to fire, that could lead to fires up there when the gate's open. But when the gate is open, it also means we can respond more quickly
Right.
in the event of a fire.
right.
Right.
Which I thought was a really, you know, to me, it was like, oh, that makes sense because it is the shortest distance to some of that land.
Mhm.
And there's been a lot of, you know, the lookout below timber sale that's on public land happened 2 summers ago. So there's been a lot of activity there and rebuilding of roads in the area.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Okay, so we've got some direction there. I do want to thank the sheriff's deputies who are handling the Street of Dreams. They'll be out there. It's hot and they're out there standing, directing traffic and taking care of folks. So I just wanted to thank them and our cadets that are out there as well. And then I just wanted to briefly touch on House Bill 4004. This is a grant that we have voted on to approve the application for, right? And so Director Manfred applied for these funds. The intention of the funds is for recruitment and retention of behavioral health employees within our HHS department. And so the county was awarded, I think, roughly $3.5 million. And in sort of an unprecedented process, we have received the money before we really have set the plan as to how to deliver it or spend it. And there's been a lot of miscommunication, I think, and a lot of unfortunate statements made about our process for deciding how we are going to do that. And I want to make it clear, not to get into the details, but I want to make it clear that that discussion is still ongoing. It's our duty to make sure we spend these funds in the most fair and efficient way possible to make sure they have the most impact. So those discussions are still ongoing with the three of us and our county administrator, Ken. And so I wanted to sort of put some tamp down on the rumors that seem to be flying about where this money is or whether or not it's going to be distributed or any of that, because it's just taking us some time to sort of work through the details. So.
I realized I had an announcement too.
Okay,
Oh,
sure.
do you still have some?
Nope, that was
Okay.
it for me.
I just wanted to give you a heads up that the proposed hotel that's proposed to go in kitty corner to the Atticus, where the news register old building is. They approached me about this C-PACE program that I think works through the state. It's funding that allows development projects to invest more money in like energy efficient infrastructure when you do a big project. So I'm meeting with them next week. Sounds like there's some county nexus there. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll find out more. I don't think it's like being a fiscal agent for a grant, but it might be something like agreeing on how property taxes are handled. But just heads up that, a company wants to do a bigger investment and it may need us to do something. And I'll bring it forward once I have more information.
Okay.
Great.
At this point, I was like, I just want to let you know that I learned about that and we'll find out more.
Okay.
And
Sounds
Abisha will
good.
be there as well.
And Jason reminded me, that I just saw that the city of Newburgh is going to place the psilocybin on a ban on the ballot
Okay.
for November. So I sent that, I think, late last night.
Okay.
So, we weren't able to avoid a patchwork necessarily, but that might be how this works out, is we might have kind of a patchwork in the county.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to do a shout out to our public works department for removal of abandoned RV that has been plaguing the residents since December. So these are expensive, they're hard to get rid of, but there's apparently an agreement between, is it planning, public works, sheriff's office? and
Yeah,
we
they
have
all work together.
to be able to do this, but it is an expensive proposition anytime one of these things gets dumped for the taxpayers to have to find a place to get rid of it and then to have it removed. But they are appreciative when we get out there. So thank you to Mark and team.
But I would say that
Was-
the wreckers who take care of them too, because they don't have to. And
No.
I'm increasingly grateful for the few that continue to.
Yes, yes.
was this the one up in Willamina?
Yeah.
Up on the hill?
Mhm.
Okay, well, that was fast.
Well, no, because I said, gee, thank you, Mark, because, well, full disclosure, we had this in the works for a number of weeks, but
Oh, okay.
it sure looked like it when they emailed us, boom, the next day it was gone. It's like, wow, that's service.
Behind the scenes and then.
Thanks
voila.
for making
Right.
us look good, Mark.
Yeah, you really
They're
did.
so responsive.
Yeah, wow, look at those guys at Yamaha County.
But yes, it is what, $3,500, $4,000 just to remove one. It's quite a big bill, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any further announcements, anybody?
If I may, just
Sure.
really quickly, because just knowing that We didn't really get a chance to talk about it last Thursday because we had a lot of things on the agenda, but I just wanted to recognize that we've had a couple of retirements this week. Both Russ and Norma Heath. Norma worked in the accounting office and in the clerk's office for a number of years. I don't have all the numbers in front of me. And Russ Heath, who was our fleet manager, I know I think they were both here around the same time.
they
So
were both
right around
35.
35
30
years.
something years.
We are seeing a lot of, we've seen a number of retirements over the last
Mhm.
several months. And, those are tough shoes to fill when
Yes.
you have 35 years of institutional knowledge
Mhm.
going. But in particular, I just want to just take a moment and at this meeting, just recognize and thank Norma and Russ again for their many years of service. They did an outstanding job for the
Yes.
county. And they'll definitely be missed, even though I know
Absolutely.
they're still going to be around.
Yes, they will.
There's more time with their vehicles or with Russ's vehicles,
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tremendous. But I also noticed, at least in Public Works, that the long tenured group has been really diligent lately about training up
Mhm.
shorter tenure people, not younger and older, but shorter tenured people. And that's been really, you saw there. So
Yeah.
thanks for that.
We
Yeah,
just don't
thank you.
catch
With Bill Gilly leaving finally, which was, really hard to let him go. And then Russ, during budgets to see him not here is going to be a
Yeah.
huge void. And then Norma, her contribution to accounting. So yeah, that's going to be tough.
And
Thank you.
until the last day, he was still test driving vehicles. So, so thank you, Russ, and thank you,
Yeah.
Norm.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, I think Mark even roped him into coming back today to help with interviews for the fleet manager. So
He's just a volunteer from the community.
Yeah,
now.
right. That's great.
Oh, I totally forgot, but really quickly, I finally got to go on the Watershed Tour for Middle Water and Light. And likewise, they're undergoing some of those long tenured position turnovers, but with still a very competent team. So it's great seeing a sustainably managed forest where they're focused on water and they make money on the side. So
Mhm.
Good deal. Great. Well, if there's nothing further for the good of the order, I will adjourn the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for July 21st, 2022. It is 11:20.